So, monitoring replication. This is kind of a tool called Replication Monitor, and you just open up in Management Studio. You go to Replication, you right click on it and select Launch Replication Monitor. There's a equivalent replemon.exe, I think, if you wanted to create a shortcut for it, but this is the way I do it. So you just launch replemon. And kind of the word of warning here is that replemon isn't perfect, and there could be cases like you can see down here. You know, it looks like there's one error. In reality, there's two errors that are happening. One happens to be in a retry. You know, replication is very good. Is it hits an error, well, it's going to keep trying until it's basically blows up, or you hit that 3 days of staleness. It's going to keep retrying as best as it can, and it does a very good job of retrying. So what's happened down here is a latency of 0, and I know in our environment that's kind of never true. I mean, there could be cases where there's really no data is happening, and you can have latency of 0, but I know in my environment we're constantly writing data. So I see this as 0, and I know that's a problem. It's just in a retry state. In a retry state, everything's good until it errors, and then it turns that little red. So the kind of warning I have, Replication Monitor, is it isn't perfect, but it does a lot of good stuff. And I've got custom scripts available on my website that basically helps out with monitoring. We'll get into that a little bit more of what it does. But you need some little checks and balances there. So don't plan on watching Replication Monitor your entire life to look for errors. You'd rather shoot yourself than do that. So inside a Replication Monitor, you have the ability to kind of see the health of your system, like how many rows behind, latent, which is called kind of latency, number of rows, and total time latency. So we've got a cool feature in 2005 plus, I think, called tracer tokens. All you do is you click, you're in your publication, you click insert tracer, and it starts populating these fields here, how long it took. So from the publisher to distributor, it took 3 seconds, and from the distributor to your subscriber, it took 5 seconds, and then the sum of those is 8 seconds. The great thing about this is it's helping you weed out where your problem point is. Is your problem at your distributor or publisher, or is your problem your subscriber or distributor? It really helps weed out 50% of your infrastructure there pretty quickly. So that's the great thing about tracer tokens. And you can see that things are healthily moving through. It took 8 seconds for this data to get through.
If it's in retry, it never comes back.
Yeah, if it's retry and the errors, these will be like a null value basically if it hasn't made it there. So that's really kind of pointing out any you got that issue on the subscriber side. And then the other thing you can look at is the subscription watch list here. It shows you the total latency, so this value up here. And then in the if you right click on one of the subscribers and do properties, you've got the undistributed commands here. And that's basically your last value, distributor to subscriber. So let's say you had this big batch, you made it to your distributor, you want to know how, boss is asking how much time is it going to take to get all my data there because we just did this major update. Well, you come to undistributed commands, and this value is usually pretty darn accurate. It says 322 rows to go, and it's going to take approximately 2 seconds based on server performance to get it done. And you monitor that for like a minute, watching the values kind of go down. Hopefully they're going down and not up. and it usually gives a pretty accurate estimate of how much time it's going to take to get that queue applied to your subscriber. So that's kind of a great way to do it. And then my other scripts I've got can email you total latency of all your subscriptions that are going on, so you can get understanding what's going on in your environment. And then if there's any above your threshold that you have, it will warn you and give you a nice little exclamation point in your email saying, you got a problem, you need to look at it. and the SQL Server does have built-in warnings and capabilities. I've never used them because I know Microsoft and everything's super chatty on warnings. So if there's something breaking in that retry logic, it's just send you alert every time. I don't need 1,000 email alerts. I need one that's telling me there's an issue. All right, I'll go investigate and figure it out. But you can do that. The alert system's pretty good. It's automatically putting in a custom or a specific error number in there. It takes care of all that stuff that you would, in coding. It's a lot of effort to kind of go through creating, custom error numbers and whatnot. But it's done for you. So this is what my custom error email looks like. I run it not in my environment every half hour. I used to do it every hour, but there have been cases where it wasn't frequent enough, so I just increased it. It just kind of tells you, generated at some time on some server, and here's the publishers, and here's the subscriber, and here's the error that happened. There's a failure of some kind, and then it gives you comments of, I can't drop this table because it's being referenced by a view. And then I put in the T-SQL code in here that you can go to get kind of more information. And I put kind of summary information down here, but the data can be really long, so I truncate it. So if you want to see the full information, you go to your distributor, run this little command, and basically it's got the ID value in there where this error hit. So it's going to give you everything past that. So if you had 20 errors after this, it's going to show you just that one error. You put a greater than sign and see everything else. And then, so it's showing the errors here, and then down below is usually what the good information is this thing's can be marked inactive and must be reinitialized. So something went stale for too long. I know this to be a dev server. Somebody just forgot about it for a while. This alert comes up and it's telling me I need to do something. Either fix the problem or reinitialize it. And then the kind of hourly replication status emails just telling me how many undelivered commands I have, what's the kind of status of each subscriber. So in progress is a great message to see. That means everything's working good. Fail, obviously there's an issue with this VS service because it's all the subscribers are having problems. You can see the undelivered command count is pretty high here in comparison to the others. So, there's a problem you need to investigate. So before I get into performance tuning, any questions on monitoring?
And also we can control how often the publish
Yeah, so it's another SQL agent job that's hitting your distribution database, grabbing this information for you, putting it in an email. So all the code is just looking at the distributor basically and getting all this information. So it's a job, you schedule it at any frequency that you want. It's something I created custom because the replication monitor isn't perfect there, and alerting, you don't want to be over alerted. That's why I have mine every half an hour, because I know half hour is acceptable business of data being stale. And I watch trends of the data. So if I see things the numbers are going up, then I know there's something I need to investigate.
If I like to test it, can I put the publisher, distributor, and the subscriber all on the same box?
Oh yeah, totally. If you got a small environment, sure. I don't understand why you put the subscriber in the same box, but if you're testing it out, sure, no problem. You can stick it all in the same box, no issues whatsoever. That's the easiest way to get up and running with it. And then you start moving things off to the other servers, which means reconfiguring, re-snapshotting, right? There's more work involved with that. You kind of basically start from scratch. You can script out everything in replication. So on the wizard's all done, you can say generate scripts, scripts it all out. Those scripts are kind of useful. It's better to stick with the wizard because the scripts they generate, there's some steps that are missing for getting the subscribers all properly jobs enabled and running and configured. So just stick with the wizard unless you need to get really advanced and script the entire environment out. You can, kind of DR scenario, definitely script it out when it's done. You can script that at any point in time, not just in Wizard. You can right click on it, generate scripts, and it'll generate it all for you. Just be caveat, run it in a staging environment, see what it's missing, because it will be missing some stuff, and the stuff that's usually missing is just configuring their subscribers. I don't know why they kind of missed that important step, but they did. So kind of performance tuning. So you have your typical kind of DBA type performance tuning, and I find that many people don't know these tips. We talked about distributor being a remote server. In Windows 2003, you've got a thing called disk alignment. If you didn't format your drive yourself with the disk part tool, then you've got an alignment issue. And basically what happens is every read you do actually ends up being 2 reads to your disk, not 1. So you instantly just halved your performance capability. 2008 and above, they fixed that problem because it figured it out in like 2005. Took them a while to figure it out. So, default cluster size of SQL servers, the kind of best recommendation out there is use 64 kilobyte size. Yeah, the default is 4 kilobyte. So, your typical defaults in Microsoft world is for stuff that was, 15 years ago. RAID 10 if you can afford it. Published database log file needs fast disk. Like every environment, if you're using the log file for something else like log shipping or replication, both use a log file, you're going to have to have fast disks. So definitely be aware of that. And then the perform volume maintenance task rights in your local security policy. Just make sure your SQL Server account has that right, and that enables data files when they're growing that it doesn't need to zero out all the bits of that file. It just instantly grows it and you're ready to go. You're not waiting for it to be zeroed out. The log file, it has to all be zeroed out, so it doesn't help the log file growth, but it's definitely kind of an instant speed improvement when your files need to grow. And then pre-create your distribution database and your subscriber to the size it needs, so you don't have fragmentation and growth issues when every time it needs to grow. So get that optimized file growth and stuff, typical DBA stuff. Really, log file, I can't stress that enough. Log file fragmentation greatly affects replication. I ran into this issue myself where we had just like 600 virtual log files in our log file, and that slowed replication down so much because it's trying to find enough room to kind of write data to in your log file because it's so fragmented that it's slowing everything down, and then it needs to send it off to the distributor. If that log file is heavily fragmented, and there's some great queries out there, I could publish one that I use for our servers, but if they're fragmented, you're going to have problems. So performance on the disks, that's a great, easy thing to do, but then if you pre-size your log files, Kimberly Tripp has got great help along those lines of how you should size it, grow it, etc. So definitely, that's where this information really comes from, is set the log file growth to 300 to 1 gig, pre-grow it. The size she recommends starting out at 8,000 megabytes to grow, and she's done a lot of performance testing with that. So your defaults is the 5 megabytes. These are ridiculous. Make a guess. Just start out with like 2 gigs if you got something small, and then your growth rate, make it a megabyte growth, not a % growth.
What is the 2 database file and 1 log file? I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, so if you have a really small database, you can have 1 data file and then 1 log file, totally fine. When you get to bigger databases, you usually want to have more databases. There's an old myth where the number of CPUs you have should equal the number of data files that you have. That's a myth. It totally depends, but I usually like to have more than 2 for database, and I'll get up to maybe 4 files. On 10 TB, I double that and go to like 8 files, so SQL Server can write to those files, you know, under exact perfect conditions. You can write to all those files at the same time, so you get the ability to write to all those files at once. So you have a big performance hit rather than one, go back, one. That's serial operation, so you can do parallel writes. That's the whole idea there. Long discussion, but under good scenarios that can happen. So that's why I do it. It may or may not help in this case, but 2 files isn't that big a deal compared to 1. And then the replication side of the thing, use pull subscriptions. Keep the snapshot folder away from the DB files, because they're normal files, right? They're not SQL files or whatever. There's BCP files, so you can stick them on a 4K cluster and be totally fine with that, because it's just like a regular file share. And definitely run your agents in continuous mode, so it's constantly looking for data to get. You can say replication, I want you to look every hour for new data. That could be something you'd like to do because you know you want to avoid some peak times during the day, right, for some kind of situations. But typically Microsoft recommends, and even I recommend, just make it continuous and constant running, because you find that when you have these big gigantic queues, it just struggles getting through massive queues. So if you just constantly try to apply all the data, this usually ends up being the best. There is an option that you have to put in the command line of these jobs called subscription streams that allows for parallel threads of getting the data into your subscribers. It can work and it can fail. When it fails, it just fails back to not doing it. So something at least worth trying out to see if it works. Definitely minimize the complexity and use of your filters, like we talked about before, and the custom agent profiles. I'll get into custom agent profiles here in a bit. And then, so long distance snapshot delivery. So in our environment, we got a main data center down in California and other environments in New York. So if I need to get that snapshot over all the way to New York, I've heard of scenarios where it was faster to go out through the internet on both sides than it was to use their own VPN tunnel. Not for the case in mine, but I've heard that from MVPs where they recommend doing that, and it was faster. So as long as you got a nice secure channel, yeah, great idea. Otherwise, I recommend 7-zipping the file. So 7-zip is open source compression tool. They've got their own algorithm, and they got .zip algorithm as well. It's a very stable program, and it works 10 times faster than Microsoft's provided solution. So I use that, zip it up, send it out to the remote subscribers. So here's kind of the picture. So you've got 3 remote subscribers. So I stick it on one of the servers, and it has its own snapshot share. And the other servers I've configured to point to that basically the O1 server. So I'm only copying over the data once, and then all the remote subscribers there, other than the O1 server, are now picking up from a local point. So I'm really saving a ton of time with zipping it up and then sending over there just once. Because otherwise, if your ports are open, it's going to try to grab all those BCP files and schema files from your remote share and pull over. You're just going to saturate your network and have all kinds of issues. So what we came up with, this solution works very well. A little bit of manual steps, but that's not that big a deal. So creating agent profiles. You can create a profile for everything involved with replication, and the stuff I'm going to go through here can really apply to all of them. So it's definitely one of those test again and make sure it all works and monitor it. But the first thing I do every time I build out replications, I tweak a few values, and the main option you come up, you have to check this little box down here to show all parameters using this profile. Once you uncheck that, now you see all the parameters that you can change. It shows you what the default value is and what you have configured for this batch size. So you tweak the value, test it, and make sure it works. some of the things that will blow up and just not work for you is if you increase the packet size too big, your network might not be able to handle it, and the agent will just fail and give you some really weird error message that you'll never figure out. But if you're tweaking these one value at a time, I always find that the batch size and the commit batch threshold here is something easy to kind of do, and Books Online actually has a great kind of recommendation and explanation of all these values and what it recommends to tweak as well. Like you can tweak the BCP threads, and the BCP threads only happens when you're creating that snapshot. It's only its purpose. So if your server can handle multi-threading and BCPing the data out, then increase the number from 1 to some value. And I wouldn't go overkill, because you don't want to bring your publisher and your master server to its knees because you get this massive snapshot you're doing, because you try to do it on too many threads. So be careful with that. There's one thing I want to point out here is the history of verbosity level, and it's basically you can make replication very chatty, so you can add options that puts a lot of logging in. You can see a lot of details of what's going on, but most often you don't need that because everything's working fine. So I usually cut down the verbosity, and then also there's a value down here is transactions per history. I don't need to know after every 100 rows. I don't need to know, how many rows were committed and whatnot. So I increase that number up, so I'm not getting as frequent information that you would see in Replication Monitor. The other performance tip that I hinted on early on is the replicating the execution of a stored procedure, and it's not on by default. But basically, what happens is I have a stored procedure on my master server, and I've configured it to utilize execution of stored procedures. Is that, let's say the stored procedure deletes 20,000 rows. Well, typically without this, you'd have 20,000 entries that replication needs to replicate out. But with the stored procedure, I can just say replicate the stored procedure call with the parameter I sent. It's going to send that one command over there and do that same operation on the destination side. Sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. And it completely depends on how your application is built. I unfortunately can't do that, but every time I call Microsoft up with a performance problem, you got this box checked. No, it's not going to work. So we go through other performance things. So I've called up Microsoft a few times in our environment. So troubleshooting examples. In this scenario, the subscription expired, so we need to reinitialize it in all of the subscribers. You could do this in the GUI, or like most things in Microsoft, you can script it out and automate this. Depends on your comfort level, which way you prefer. So it's up to you. But let's say you try to do this and you get an error message, and saying you can't promote the transaction to a distributed transaction because there's an active save point in transaction. You're like, oh, what the heck is this? Well, it has the words distributed transaction, so you go down that line. First kind of idea was, is distributed transaction working? Because I had that in the error message, so I tried that out. Begin distributed transaction, select star from some remote server, and just looking at sys databases and commit your end. And I got out a list of all databases. I've troubleshooted the heck out of MSDTC, and I put all my knowledge in this one page here on my website. So if you run into those MSDTC issues, definitely look here. It basically has everything that can come up. So the second idea is check for DDL triggers. It's only because I was searching on Google that somebody figured out that a DDL trigger can cause issues like this. So Google was my friend in this one, and bingo, I found the answer. So I disabled the trigger on the database, applied my snapshot, and then re-enabled the trigger afterwards. So probably not a great design in this trigger code here, but I got around the problem by disabling it and then re-enabling it. If you're not getting a good error message of what's going on, you got to hit distributor database. There's also this table up here, MS replication alerts. This kind of happened on the server. It doesn't have a lot of great information, but it's at least a starting point. I usually quickly jump into the distribution database and do the top 300 with the past half hour MS REPL errors, and you see all the errors. And basically, there's this exact sequence number that comes with that error number. You just put in both of these parameters here and MS or SP browse REPL commands, and it's going to show you everything in that batch that's going on. And it's ordered by the row number there. So your error might even say the error is on row number 5. So you just find row number 5 in this big batch that comes out of REPL commands, and of course it comes unordered. So you have to search for it. But basically you can see there's a primary key ID in there somewhere, because it always needs that. And then from there you can determine by the proc that gets created. So replication by default will create an update, delete and insert proc for all your tables that you have in replication. So you see that's doing an update to this ID value, and from there you can determine, well, if it's trying to do an update, it doesn't exist in the subscriber, well maybe I could create it real quick, because every once in a while you get these little hiccups in replication, like the one row is missing for some reason, or there's a user who's got the permission, too many permissions, and the subscriber is deleting that order out of the database, and that doesn't work very well. You really want to lock down so they just have read-only access to that database, so they're not changing the data. You'd have to switch to merge replication if you needed them to have the ability to make changes. But Chris Serlinski, one of the Microsoft CSS guys, showed us all how to kind of skip a row here. It's not that intuitive. I don't know how anybody figured it out without Microsoft's help. But basically you kind of follow this methodology here, and you find the exact sequence number that you want to skip, and you stick it into these values here, and then you restart the distribution agent job. So in your subscriber, the job that's collecting the data is called a distribution agent. You just restart that job, and it'll just skip that row. Any of the issues that you're having there, and you skip it. So you're basically saying, I'm okay with missing this row, and you can manually add it back, or you just completely ignore it. It all depends on your needs. And like I said before, you can add infinite amount of logging. There's a lot of information that comes out of this one. It's usually the CSS guys at Microsoft, the only one who can understand the output of it. But some of it's actually pretty useful. So you're just running into issues, and you check the error logs, you check the job history itself. It's not telling you for information, then you got to stick this little dash output on the job and send it to some location they can reach. And then it outputs a lot of good information there, pretty detailed. Another issue you can kind of run into is ANSI padding compatibility. They have to be the same, otherwise you get this error message saying they're incompatible. So when you create your snapshot, it's going to create out schema files, the .sch files to create the tables with. Just go in there and whack out the ANSI paddings off statement, and then next time it tries again, because it's always retrying, it will be compatible now. And ANSI padding is deprecated, I think, in this version, or if not the next version. They're just making it all on for everything, so you can't turn it off. And every once in a while somebody might have screwed up the procs on your subscriber side. If you need that, you've got a nice little script here to kind of recreate the procs for you. And then one of the issues you might run into is if you need to do a schema change on your table, and it's going to require a re-snapshot. So you make a schema change and says to your publication, and I'm thinking of, in an early example, you want to add a column that you didn't add before. That's kind of a schema change to the publication. That's what this kind of scenario falls under. Because they're going to tell you, oh, you need to reinitialize all your stuff. That means a full snapshot of all your tables in your publication. Well, you really didn't want to do all of them. You just want this one little table. So the trick is is to unpublish that table. Your data's stale on the other side, so it stays there. Run the snapshot, kind of sends all the DDL commands, and then you got this table that's not in your publication anymore, and now you just add it back in, and then select that column that you wanted added, and then republish it out. And Replication is going to see that, oh, I'm just adding this one table to the publication. Well, let me just create a snapshot of that one table, and then BCP out the data out, and the scribers will pick up that one table. So that's kind of the workaround if you needed to change the schema in your publications.
How do you run these snapshots without arguing for initialization?
By the scenario, if you add, let's say you add a column to a table, it's going to take care of that and add it on the destination. No worries, right? You add another table to your publication, it doesn't do a reinitialization. It just you have to create a new snapshot, and it will snapshot just that new table for your publication. So you have an existing publication, you add another table, you just go in, add another table. It will. You say you want to create a snapshot, yes. You generate the snapshot then. It won't ask you for reinitialization unless you're making changes to it, like taking a column out of an existing table in your publication. You modify an existing property, that's when I want to reinitialize. And the trick around that is just take that whole table out of your publication, run the snapshot, get that applied to your subscribers, and then go back and re-add that table. So we got 0 minutes left, so the kind of key takeaway points here. Wow, that's perfect timing. I didn't think I feel that. There's like 50 slides in there. So definitely download them, use them as a reference. Hit me up on email. It's a SQL guy Chuck at Gmail if you have any questions. So basically, it's fairly easy to set up. Understand your network, a user's dedicated distributor, optimize your data files, definitely important. Customize your agent profiles. Don't rely on watching Replication monitor all day long. Minimize user filters and control your subscription snapshots over your WAN, so it's not taking forever to apply them. And now you can go back to your boss and say, hey, I implemented Replication and just offloaded 10,000 queries every day to our main master server. Can I get a pay raise? He says yes. Yeah. Sweet. And I got some useful links here. My company, Demand Media, is always hiring, even beyond SQL stuff. That's all I have. Any final questions? Or is everybody ready to get out of here and win some raffle prizes?